What's good, everyone? It's VenomousStare back with more 2v2. That's right, if you didn't know, if you're new to the channel, I love StarCraft 2 and play it very frequently. And I specifically like the 2v2 game type, which I like to play with my cousin Spencer, who is down here in the bottom left, aka Elusive Smoke. And very frequently we would do aggressive builds in the early days of StarCraft 2, back when we were both learning the game and gold level. Last season we achieved Masters League in 2v2, so these games are definitely getting up there as far as level goes. That's not to say that they're mistake free. Elusive Smoke puts a gateway down. Now I really like 2v2 because not only do you have to work with an ally, but it's this nice mix of you're playing a 2v2 game, so obviously you're not playing alone, but it's not a 4v4 team game where you're really having to focus on a lot of different moving elements. It's really just you and one buddy, and you have to go for complementing builds, complementing strategies. So there are a lot of different schools of thought to this, as we see up here in the blue, Jin, the Zerg, and Wheelbug, the Terran, facing off against Savagewood and Elusive Smoke. The formal intros there. On the new map, Traitor's Exile, this is actually replacing a map called Fields of Death, which was extremely popular to do era builds on. And Traitor's Exile is not the macro map that Fields of Death was. It's actually kind of hard to take some bases in a way. So if we take a quick look at this map, both sides are kind of on a plateau. There is a base here that is kind of hard to defend if you want to fast expand because of how wide this choke is. But then there is a base here and a base up here with backdoor rocks, and this plateau ranges all the way down. As you see, a proxy pylon trying to come up from Savagewood, as both Protoss players are on one base, remember, so some aggression is going to come out, but a Reaper will see this, as the Reaper was queued up to look. If you saw, there was a move shift to look all throughout this top little plateau area. And what do I mean by plateau? See this whole little area with this cliff, and Elusive Smoke built a proxy pylon, but it will get scouted by an Overlord. And the pylon was right on the cusp of this plateau. So notice this kind of mirrors, because there's rocks here, and this Reaper really wants to be looking for pylons because it's checking every little corner. And if we look at the vision, they don't know that it's a one base build because they still have the natural and Fog of War. But the Lings clear out the probe, and the Lings are going to run over to the pylon, and this probe from Savagewood is going to get stomped out. So Elusive Smoke and Savagewood are really going to have to reach into their bag of tricks if they want to go one base. So it looks as though the Protoss over here on the right, Savagewood, is going to opt for Robo here. Now this is something pretty common we see with Warp Gate all-ins, because with the Warp Gate being nerfed as far as the warp in time on a single pylon without a gateway attached goes, a lot of Protoss players are opting to make Warp Prisms just exclusively. They're not making Immortals or Observers out of their Robo because they just say, well, the Warp Prism is going to act as a substitute for the proxy pylon. A lot of times they don't even bother putting proxy pylons out as backup. So it makes it even more all-in, and makes it like if you lose the Warp Prism, it's even more devastating. As we see Savagewood start the Warp Prism up, and he is chrono boosting Resonating Glaives for his Adepts, so he will counter Zergling based builds very well. And Elusive Smoke is doing the same thing. His Robo is significantly later, as Savagewood's Warp Prism is already halfway done, and Elusive Smoke's has not started. There it goes. So whenever you go Resonating Glaive Adepts do very well against light units, like Marines without combat shields and Lings. But the problem is that even though that Adepts do well against those two units, if the other player has a ton of them, or if they have combat shield Marines, or medevacs, basically a supporting cast, so you see Savagewood warping in a Stalker, or if the Zerg has Banelings, your Adept pressure suddenly becomes gutted, and 4 Cyclones are out here for the blue team. So it is going to be very difficult here for either Protoss to do damage, because Cyclones are very, very good against Warp Prism openers, and they're very good against Gooby, aka Oracle openers. And we see Wheelbug only has one Cyclone here. A nice little depot drop down there to kind of wedge his Cyclone into a corner, but Savagewood focus fires probes, aka SCVs, excuse me, as he is also killing the Cyclone. And what do we see? Elusive Smoke's going to come in, and he actually had a chance to warp in the Fog of War. Lings are out here for Jin. He has 6 Banes, so Elusive Smoke has to be careful. We saw Savagewood runs away, and suddenly Banes are going to come up here. And Elusive Smoke picks up a couple Adepts, and he's down to 2 that are in the very red. And with a Cyclone opener for Wheelbug, Savagewood was forced to run away. If we go to units lost, the red Protoss players have done a little damage. Savagewood is taking a base, but a lot of Cyclones are coming out. Now 5 might not seem like a lot, but in the early game they pack a punch. Here comes the lock on. Savagewood runs his core back almost immediately, fires up a overcharge. He's powering out an Immortal, but with only 3 gates and warp-ins going on over here, Savagewood is going to be in a little bit of trouble here. This is always awkward when you do a 1 base all in, and his Warp Prism is still out over here on the map, but drop off some Zealots, and he's getting attacked here. Not even an Immortal is going to be able to deal with this, but he's going to run the Zealots into the main. Huge damage there from Savagewood. He even circumvents the missile turret there, and he needs to overcharge badly, and he does, but a little bit late. Suddenly the Robo sags out of commission. Savagewood's in a lot of trouble. Fires up 1 Photon overcharge. He fires up another as well to shut down the Ling harassment, and suddenly Elusive Smoke, his ally, comes back with his Warp Prism and Adept combo, and Savagewood's Dark Shrine finishes, but Savagewood has to warp in the very back here due to being pressured, and it's going to be so slow. Elusive Smoke comes in, and he's going to help clean out for Savagewood, but Savagewood has lost a lot. But meanwhile, in the base of Wheelbug, Wheelbug has taken a devastating amount of damage to Zealot counters. And that's the problem with very committed micro-based aggression, is sometimes you get harassed, you get counterattacked, and in the early game, whenever you're rallying out all of your units aggressively, you're not really anticipating a big Zealot counterattack. Remember, Wheelbug had ranged out with Cyclones over here and in his main. He thought he had kind of at least pushed the Warp Prism back temporarily, wouldn't take severe damage with the Prism, or to the Prism because of the turret. And Savagewood did lose a base. Now let's look at the vision of Wheelbug. He thinks, oh wow, Savagewood doesn't have anything left, he's destitute. Well, the fact of the matter is Savagewood took this top right base, and we can see Elusive Smoke has a Warp Prism here. He's trying to do damage, and suddenly Savagewood has Dark Templar, and he made that base lift, and Adepts are out here for Elusive Smoke. So double Warp Prism action for the Protoss players. Adepts are really bad at killing buildings. Elusive Smoke starts to range back, but he's grouped pretty bad. Here come the slow Banes. Ooh, a little bit of a split there from Elusive Smoke. And he phases away. But Elusive Smoke was taking a pretty hard engagement there. There were so many Lings and Banes as he does lose the Warp Prism there. So 2 guys aggressed upon Elusive Smoke there, as Savagewood is whacking away at this base, and a scan occurs as Savagewood warps in 2 more DTs and picks up the 4th one. Nice move there from Savagewood to cancel the building Warp Prism, or at least cancel the production of the building Warp Prism, and then fly away with all 4 DTs. It might seem like a very newbie thing to say, but maintaining your harassment units is very, very important, especially for Terran players. I see Terran players are more guilty of just kind of being flippant with the harassment units. Oh, you know, that drops dead, especially newer players who get kind of overwhelmed with multitasking. If it looks like your stuff's going to die, pick it up and run away, and you can live to fight another day. You see, Savagewood might just run in and snipe this turret, and it could be close, so actually it's not at all, because there wasn't a lot of DPS. Scan goes down, and 4 mules, or maybe not 4 anymore, and now it's just 2. Savagewood starts to attack the CC, and picks up all 4 DTs again. Great job there. And he's starting to mine, having a little bit of worker issues there, as it is common, especially at lower levels, if you open with a 1 base build, you have trouble with your macro. because you're not really hitting your normal timings. You're kind of doing everything off of intuition. And Savagewood's boxed in here, and he drops off the DTs. He's flying the Warp Prism around, and boom, drops the one off right in front of him like a good receiver. And look at this, an armada of hallucinated Warp Prisms from Elusive Smoke and a hallucinated Colossus. Oh, that was brilliant. So essentially the hallucination is a spell, as we see Savagewood doing more great damage with the DTs and picking them up. So the hallucination is an ability on the Sentry, as you see another hallucinated Warp Prism, and essentially they are units that can't do damage, and they're just fake units that are used to deceive your opponent. And Elusive Smoke essentially hallucinated multiple Warp Prisms to make it appear as though there were like 5 Warp Prisms flying to every base, and then to confuse the Terran and the Zerg, the blue team, to make them think, well, which Warp Prism is actually real, and they didn't know which one to aggress upon, as though it was the Magical Hats card in Yu-Gi-Oh! And then after that, as though using hallucination like that wasn't brilliant enough, Elusive Smoke hallucinated a Colossi, and then the big Ling Bane swell is suddenly really, really bad against a Colossi. Even just one Colossi with some Sentry, it really counters Ling Bane really hard. So what it looked like from Jin's vision is when he ran up this ramp, it looked like, isn't that just awful, his voice pack? It looked like when he ran up this ramp there was a Colossi and a bunch of Sentries, as we see more hallucinated Warp Prisms. And a real one is still up here. Another base down here in the bottom left. Double Forge on the way. Roach Speed on the way for the Zerg player. It's 2 more hallucinations. And Elusive Smoke is just making these hallucinated Warp Prisms and sending them out everywhere to create mass panic. And this makes it hard because it kind of, especially if you play with everyone on the like separated colors, like I would recommend doing when you play team games, where basically your allies one color and all the bad guys are another. It's just like, oh, 5 red Warp Prisms are flying around, and Savagewood's going to try to do more aggression here at this base with this turret. There is a turret though, so he's not going to be able to do it. Notice there is another fake Warp Prism, and whenever they fly in detection, they can see that they're fake. But more DTs are coming out, this time for Elusive Smoke, and Savagewood has a Stray Immortal, and he's just going to gun down some Creep Tumors here to be cute. And Elusive Smoke is out here wreaking havoc. He's going to focus the Spore. So Multi-prong Dark Templar harasses. Savagewood is going to throw in a DT of his own, but finally we see some splits here. The missile turret does get burning, and Savagewood moved his Warp Prism down to the west side because he had been harassing with it over here on the east side. And he drops off DTs again. There is a Spore. Savagewood is researching Shadow Step, aka Dark Templar Blink. He's going to kill a Spore. There's no detection over here, and Jin can't see anything, and suddenly he's going to lose a base. And there's more faulty, and by faulty I mean fake, bamboozle, mystery Warp Prisms coming out here. Mystery Meat Warp Prisms, and here's the real one from Savagewood in the corner, and it's warping in DTs and Zealots. The Zealots chew through the Queens, as we see more fake Warp Prisms distracting and confuddling the blue team. As when there are 5 of them, even if you have detection kind of spaced out, it can be hard to tell which one's real. And 3 DTs walk in there for Elusive Smoke. Savagewood with more gates, as even if you forget your gates in the mid game, it is a good idea to do a big gateway explosion so you don't just continue to float the money. Savagewood, of course, with the 3rd base as well. Elusive Smoke just now getting his 3rd alive and kicking, as his main base is destitute. And if all he should have like basically 10 probes. If he just transfers his probes from his main to his 3rd, that could be game changing and would be the difference between having pretty much no economy and a good economy. And we see Corrosive Bile coming down onto the phony Warp Prisms there. Notice that both Plurados players still have a real Warp Prism, except Elusive Smoke just lost his, as perhaps he even forgot which ones are real, which ones are fake. Thermal Lance coming here for Savagewood, as well as +2. +2 and Storm coming for Elusive Smoke. And another phony Warp Prism going down. Remember, these just cost energy, not money. But a big Roach, slow Bane Swell, and Storm is not done. This is so big because Storm can crush this push. Ooh, Elusive Smoke goes a time warp down, but with sentries against Corrosive Bile, he's not going to be able to hold for too long, so the Corrosive Bile stomp out the force field, and his buddy Savagewood comes in, throws in some force fields of his own, segments and distracts half of the army, but suddenly with the Storm still not being done, Elusive Smoke, nice job there as he actually wastes some Banes of the blue team by morphing an Archon. Savagewood doesn't really have any pylons to overcharge, but he has a couple Colossi. Beautiful force fields from Savagewood as he segments off the very dangerous Zerg army, and he's kiting back more. Now this is tricky for Savagewood because Thermal Lance isn't done, so if he doesn't force field like that, then the Zerg army encroaches on him and crushes him. As it stands, the blue team army is going to rip apart the base, but we see a little counterattack here. Savagewood with a great play here with DT and Zealot harassment, as this just looks like you're being harassed with Zealots if you glance over while you're multitasking and counter-attacking. But suddenly, oh, the base dies even when you send roaches over there, and the DT is going to go at one of the last remaining mining bases and the lair. So the Zerg, oh, he's going to make a decision, and it's the wrong one to go back up into the ramp, as he's going to try to fight again, and Savagewood has a lot of laser beams here. The fourth Colossi is going to join the fray, as there's one Viking here. The sentries are going to double back, but suddenly the Zerg army has completely dissipated, and that's the thing with two Robo-Colossi, is it's very cutthroat. You can garner a very strong advantage very quickly, as the Spore Crawler mercifully saves the base of the Zerg, and he does clean up that Dark Templar in the nick of time. But there has been a plethora of harassment going on in this game from the red team. This base is still alive for Elusive Smoke. Savagewood might run in. These are High Templar from Elusive Smoke, and he storms the mineral line. Wow, great storm there. Two force fields go down as well as a storm. So double trouble there as far as effort goes on segmenting the Zerg army. The base goes down. Great job as the Terran is down to one base as a recall occurs, and we can see what Elusive Smoke contributed as his two Templar are going to be Ramsey Bolton to death, as it looks like this is just brutal there. They're getting drilled into oblivion. No mercy at all. And Savagewood, after his recall, is going to take a base up in the top right. Elusive Smoke has still yet to retake another base. This one's pretty much mined out, so he should really probably kill these rocks. Notice this base is still almost dead from all the DT harassment. Savagewood is still warping it up here. But the blue team is not in a very good position. They've been harassed so heavily. They have a lot of units lost. This base is mined out. That one's pretty much mined out. That one, notice that this base still has minerals because this guy has lost so many workers. Wheelbug has. Savagewood is going to elect to clear out the rocks. This is a good move because he will be able to defend this base and this base. Whenever you take bases close to each other, you want to kill the rocks so you can easily transport your army between the two bases. Might seem like a rudimentary tip to many, but a lot of people are kind of like, well, I want this rocks because it's kind of like a wall-in against the Zerg. No, you actually just want to be able to wheel out right up here into the top right. As we see, Elusive Smoke does finally take another base. And the Zerg player, even though he has a pretty big army, he doesn't have a big economy. He's transferring all of these drones off to this left side base, and he's not really mining a whole lot. He might have 43 workers, but doesn't have a whole lot of the way in tech. He's pretty much on pure roach. If we go to upgrades, he's behind the Terran, who has been like in single-digit workers for a large part of the game and has been trying to go a weird mech opener that already transitions not that well into double upgrades, is at 0-0. And whenever you fall behind very early off of a quirky opener, as we see Elusive Smoke might storm drop, boom, there's one, there's two. Great stuff from Elusive Smoke, even though the Protoss did see it, and he'll warp an Archon there. So this is the kind of stuff that is almost more cute than it is effective, but is very annoying to deal with because if you don't micro, then you just lose an insane amount of workers. Savagewood is up to a disgusting army here. He has 7 Colossi, 1 Immortal, and 4, count them, 4 Archons. This is going to obliterate through a Zerg army that has worse upgrades. Notice the Savage Wood also has Zealot Legs, Thermal Lance, and Shadow Step. Big play there as Savage Wood force fields off the army, and there's no Storm Energy there, unfortunately, for Elusive Smoke, but just devastation occurring there. And then a little flank on the backside, but the Terran player has been behind for such a large portion of the game. If we go to income, just down to 14 workers. He's been harassed so frequently. Savage Wood might go for the killing blow here as the Overseer dies, and Savage Wood is going to spring forward with this army, and Jin GG's, his buddy, will be soon to follow, and there it is. So let's rewind a little bit, because I did see a storm there. There's always one guy really mad about me missing something about the observing, or like with the observing as an observer, something going on in the game like that. I'm sure I missed on the first view. But when there are so many things going on in the game, just like whenever you're playing StarCraft and you take damage to a drop, it's impossible to catch everything. Because with 4 fucking people playing, obviously there's going to be more than one thing going on at a time. So like I said, killing these rocks is important whenever you take this base. You do leave yourself vulnerable to Zerg counters, so you want to build something out here to get vision. One of the worst things you can do is clear rocks, open up big chokes, and then never get vision of them. Then you're basically just creating a huge vulnerability to this base and never looking at it. So not only do I build a pylon, I build a gate to warp in effectively. Look at the income tab. Yeah, Elusive Smoke's not doing too hot, but he's taking this base. This base is alive and kicking. For the blue team, this guy, remember, lost this base due to the recall push. So he's on one base, essentially. And this Zerg, okay, he's on one base too. He's in the same situation Elusive Smoke is pretty much, where this base will finish to give him 2 base economy. But with Zerg, you always want to be a base ahead, and also this base is very low hit points wise, so it's vulnerable to a counterattack. Whenever you get a very big army, a very scary army, you want to kind of set up pylons all over the map so you can counterattack. And here comes the storm drop, and after Elusive Smoke uses the Warp Prism, of course there's a Viking, he can't help it, he makes an Archon. So this base over here, it's kind of hard to defend because it's off the plateau. He might have been better taking this one. But I'm really interested to see what this army does trying to push up this ramp, because the Elusive Smoke finally has Storm done. So here comes my big army, but see, he's going to try to push up into this ramp. So let's see what Elusive Smoke does. He has a lot of Zealots, some Crossfire, boom! Throws Storm down. So if the Zerg wants to commit up the ramp, he just gargles Storm. Half of his damage, or half of his army gets completely half health. So essentially what that means is he can't run up because Elusive Smoke just storm. But then he didn't expect it, gets flanked by me and his ally, who had just been getting his head smashed in with Dark Templar all freaking game, wasn't really able to accumulate an adequate army. So if you enjoyed this 2v2, make sure you subscribe for more, leave a comment. And this game was a little bit unique. There was multi-prong Warp Prism Harass, DT, Blink, lots of hallucinated Warp Prisms. So if you enjoy quirky stuff like this, or Dark Templar, or not Dark Templar, excuse me, 2v2, subscribe for more.